Good morning. I wanted to go over with you guys the assignment hashtag 008. This was the first of the two documents that I shared with you to go over our claim, evidence, reasoning, argument for the flame test that were run. When I went through and left comments on your documents, I realized that there were some discrepancies in the way we answered questions or filled in information. So I thought it would be best if perhaps, because I'm not physically with you, I give you an example or model how I would have gone about doing this particular assignment in the hopes that it helps you complete hashtag 009, which is the graphic organizer for putting together the actual writing assignment. So I wanted to point this out. When we're developing an argument, which is all what claim, evidence, and reasoning is about, is developing a scientific argument, you start with a question, okay? And I just wanted to review with you the question we looked at, and then we'll come in here and start looking at how did we gather our evidence, how did we analyze it, what kind of claim could you make, what are your justifications. Step 4 is huge, okay, because you're not just repeating your evidence, you're explaining why, that big piece of why and how it supports the evidence that backs up your claim. Okay, and then, the step 5 here, the background concepts, that is all that research that we did on those 5 extra questions that you came up with in class. So, where are we starting? We're going to look at the original question, because this entire argument needs to come back to answering the original question. So, here we go. Our original question was this: what type of element can a flame test be used to identify? And I have certain parts of the question circled just like we did this on the board. It's still written on my board. I wrote it here so it was easier for you to see. We had to identify what we meant by certain parts of the question. So we talked about what an element was, what do we mean by a type of element, what's a flame test, and what does it mean to identify something? So let's start with what an element is. When we were talking in class, we really simply broke down the idea that an element would be a single type of atom that has the same number of protons, okay, specifically, but protons, neutrons, and electrons. Now, in our lab, we didn't burn elements, we burned compounds, but we're trying to figure out what kind of element, what type of element the flame test can be used to identify. So we talked about what an element was. We talked about what we meant by a type of element. Make sure you can see that. Okay. The type of element we meant was like a category within the periodic table. Is there a specific main category of element that we could identify? So when we talked about this, we talked about could the element being identified be a metal, non-metal, or metalloid? Okay, so we were really looking at the main category as a type of element in our question. So that's really what we were looking to figure out when we collect our evidence and analyze it, all right? We also then talked about what a flame test was. And we just talked about flame tests being the addition of energy, specifically heat energy, to a substance, compounds in this particular case, and we're looking for a color signature. Is there something that helps us to see what happens when it's burning? Okay, and we talked about what did it mean to identify here, and when we're identifying, I think it's pretty obvious to identify something means to figure out what it is. So we're trying to determine what the compound is, and really we're trying to determine the type of element in a compound. Okay, So it goes right back to this particular piece here. Can we figure out the type of element, as in identifying it, when using a flame test? That all goes right back to that original question right here, and this is what your entire argument should be built to answer, based on evidence collected, based on how you analyzed it, and based on some of the research that you folks have done. Okay? So, now that we've broken this down, okay, the original question that we have looked at, that your entire claim and reasoning, justification should be to answer. Okay? We're going to go here. Back to this whole step-by-step process where we went through and gathered evidence. We also then, in class, analyzed our evidence. We broke down the evidence into 4 main categories of color. We listed all of the different compounds underneath those particular pieces. So as you moved through 008 here, this assignment, you filled in that data table ever so nicely. And so